Welcome to the Massachusetts Historical Swordsmanship virtual demonstration. What does sword fighting look like? Does it look like this? Or does it look like this? Or maybe like this.
You're using Bonetti's defense against me, huh?
I thought it fitting, considering the rocky terrain.
Naturally. You must expect me to attack with Capafero.
Naturally, but I find that Tybalt cancels out Capafero. Don't you?
Unless the enemy has a study, he's a glipper. Which I have.
The discipline of historical fencing is very different from the discipline of theatrical fencing. Historical fencing, like other fields of history, uses documentation to reconstruct past fencing systems based on both written evidence and on living tradition. Whereas in theatrical fencing, we're trying to work with a cooperative partner in order to show the audience a simulated fight and, of course, not hurt anybody. In historical fencing, while we're similarly not trying to hurt anybody, we have an uncooperative adversary. We're trying to defeat this adversary, and in order to do so, we're trying to disguise our intentions rather than to show the audience. Following will be a demonstration of classical and historical weapons. By classical, we mean weapons that are in a living tradition, whereas historical weapons are purely reconstructed from evidence. The first weapons form we're going to show is classical foil. The foil originated in the late 17th century as a practice weapon for the small sword. We practice it as it was in the late 19th and early 20th century. It is a thrust-only weapon that uses conventions. By conventions, we mean that if you are attacked, then you must defend yourself or completely avoid the attack before launching your response. The target is torso only. Here, Chris and Ken will demonstrate foil fencing. The first thing you'll notice is the importance of the engagement or blade contact. Up, Chris's attack arrives. No clear priority there, no point for anyone. There, Chris's remise arrived. Ken should have riposted immediately. Up, Ken's disengagement. Notice conservative footwork and blade work. Ken beat, feinted, took the blade, and hit. We don't rely on priority, but it's important to control the other person's blade. Ken's riposte. Ken took the blade and hit. Ken made a feint attack. Ken made a direct attack to Chris's torso. Chris's attack arrives. Ken's attack arrives. Foil teaches the fundamentals of all fencing. Timing, distance, blade control, and other things. And that the weapon should always move before the body. Ken's indirect riposte arrives. He avoided Chris's parry of the riposte. Chris's remise. Chris is fencing in the more aggressive Italian style. Ken is fencing in the French style. Ken's riposte arrives to the low line. Ken's feint attack arrives. We salute, and then, because of COVID, we don't shake hands, but we fist bump. The next classical weapon we'll show you is the épée. The épée was a dueling weapon, following its footage from actual duels from the early 20th century. It's a thrusting-only weapon. Duels such as these were usually to first blood. They were very common in France before World War I, whereas Germans and Italians preferred the sabre. Of course, the épée was also used for sport. This is an épée competition held in France in 1911. For sport, the sharp point would be fitted instead with a coronal-shaped point d'arrêt. The full body was and still is the target, and there's no priority. Here are Chris and Ken demonstrating the épée. As you can see, it's a very conservative style. Notice that the hand is a primary target because it's closest. Because the blades are leveled at one another's hands, it's harder to find the opposing steel. Ken just tried to hit the underside of Chris's hand. Chris tries to hit Ken, but Ken makes a stop hit to the forearm. There's another stop to the forearm. Whereas foil is an attack-parry riposte weapon, épée is an attack-counterattack weapon. In this, it follows earlier rapier practice. It hit to Chris's hand behind the guard. It hit to Ken's body. He let Chris get too close. Chris is again fencing with an Italian weapon, whereas Ken is fencing with a French weapon. Another hit to Ken's body. Unlike in foil, double hits are a possibility and score against both. Here, double hit, double defeat, leg and forearm. A stop hit to Chris's mask. Notice the importance of keeping distance and of extending the weapon ahead of the body. A hit to Chris's body. Etiquette requires a salute and handshake, or, due to COVID, a fist bump. The sabre is the third classical weapon. Here's some footage of old-style sabre from 1891. Sabre is a conventional cut-and-thrust weapon, but the way we do it, we use a full-body target. Here's Ken and Anthony demonstrating sabre. Notice again the importance of the engagement, so you know where the other person's blade is. Hit to Anthony's mask. It's a very fast weapon, so let's see that in some slow motion. Ken tries for the leg, Anthony pulls distance. Ken feints and cuts under the arm. Another feint to the head. Again in slow motion. Notice that how, even though it's a conventional weapon, Ken still closes the line against a double hit as he recovers. A deux blade to the cheek. Again, the blade must precede the foot. The power comes from the lunge. You don't need a huge cutting movement since the swords are theoretically very sharp. Trying to hit low exposes your hand and arm, so Anthony hits Ken's hand. Remember, if you're attacked, you must defend yourself. Feint head, hit body. Circular cuts, or moulinets, are also used in the system, but smaller, subtler actions work just as well, like the thrust of the body by deux blade. Another deux blade of the body, this time is a riposte. Ken tries to beat with the skip step or patinando. Antony pulls distance, spoiling Ken's attack. And hit to the hand. A good lunge keeps your back foot on the floor. Hit to Ken's head. Here's Marissa and Mike. In case you're wondering, they're fencing Dussack in the background. Mike's feint attack. Marissa's saber is made to her size. If you're a smaller person, you need to do a lot of footwork in order to command the timing and the distance. Nothing done in that pass. Let's see another. This is Marissa's remise. Mike should have reposted. The last classical weapon we're going to show you is the baton. This is footage from Lyon, France from 1897. The baton is a conventional weapon. It's a 1.4 meter stick, usually made of coppice chestnut wood. It's the living descendant of Longsword. Here are Antony and Mike demonstrating baton. We actually teach this as the introductory weapon. It teaches timing, distance, coordination, and relaxation. The weapon is moved in twirls called Milanese. They form the basis for both attack and defense. The target is the head, torso, and shin. That's Antony's riposte. You can see the distance and timing element here. Mike gets too close, and Antony hits him in the head. Another pass. Mike's counter riposte. Strikes must be delivered by Molinet or from a chambered position. Mike's riposte, Antony dodges. The sticks again are made of coppice chestnut wood imported from France. That was Antony's riposte. The weapon can be considered any long implement, like a discharged musket or a boat oar. That was Antony's final riposte. Let's move to historical or reconstructed weapons such as the longsword. Here's Ferre de Liberia's treatise from 1410. It's a two-handed cutting and thrusting sword. It's a typical medieval weapon that was practiced into the early modern era. Here's Joachim Meyer's treatise from 1570. Baton is an excellent preparation for this. Here's Marissa and Chris showing some longsword. You can see how the baton movements really translate. Marissa cuts Chris's hand. Here's Josh and Brandon. They're going pretty easy here at first, but they're going to speed up in a bit. Notice all the things we saw before. Engagement, the use of Milanese, not to mention footwork and timing and distance. Brandon parries and winds on the sword, and thrusts the mask. The feel of the opposing steel is very important. Sentiment de faire, French, tacto in Italian, Furlan in German. We'll use the German since they're fencing in the German style. Josh's Verschau, or back edge horizontal cut, lands. Brandon makes an Unterhau, or ascending cut. Grappling is also allowed in this weapon, though if you're skillful, you can avoid it. Notice how the guards are fluid positions, not static postures. Everything is to gain time on the opponent. Brandon's Verschau hits Josh's head. Josh makes a thrust. Brandon's hold lets him get him in a cut. It can also go the other way. Josh's parry or riposte arrives. Josh yields off the parry and cuts. Brandon cuts the mask. Longsword isn't just hacking, it's a subtle art. There's a great deal of tactical thought. Even the actual fencing phrases tend to be pretty quick. Brandon cuts the mask on Josh's feint. Here's Chris and Jordan. This bout's going to really show the importance of moving the weapon before you move your body. Chris waits too long in extended position. Jordan cuts him under the hand. Here, Jordan intercepts Chris's cut. Let's see it in slow motion. Keeping distance is very important. There, Jordan again intercepted Chris's cut. Here's it again in slow motion. Jordan's counterattack arrives there too. Notice how he catches the blade on his strong. There, Jordan counterattacked with a thrust. Jordan attacked on Chris's preparation with a sidestep. Let's turn to Rapier and Dagger. The Rapier was a sidearm of the Renaissance gentleman. It can be dated back to Camillo Agrippa's seminal treatise of 1553. It's a cut and thrust weapon, and most associated with Italy. Italian masters were in fact widely influential. However, there were attempts to reconstruct it in the early 20th century. The rapier is often fenced in conjunction with the dagger. Attempts to revive it were made in France after World War I because it was thought that ambidexterity would counteract the unilaterality of traditional fencing and lead to better physical development. Today, of course, we would never give a lesson without a mask, but they had a looser idea of safety back then. These are the French masters Lacaze and Dubois doing a bit of sword and dagger. And here are Ken and Chris showing the same thing with reproduction rapiers and daggers. Notice again the importance of engagement. There's a hit to Chris's mask. It's not easy to coordinate both weapons together. Two weapons gives many possibilities for attack and for defense. And there's a hit to Chris's body. The key is to defend with the dagger while simultaneously striking at the sword. Having a dagger also makes infighting very dangerous. There is a counterattack to Ken's body. Movement can be inline or offline with this weapon's form. Nothing done in that pass. Turning at the waist can shorten the rapier, making a defensive triangle with the sword and the dagger, while also deceiving the opponent as to one's reach. Ken hit there the same technique as before. There's a counterattack to Chris's body. Notice how the dagger can parry while the sword strikes. There's a hit to Chris's body. Notice the offline footwork. There's an attack to Chris's body, deceiving his dagger parry. Ken is using a cup hilt rapier and a sail guard dagger, while Chris is using a swept hilt rapier and a ring hilt dagger. A hit to Chris's body. Chris retreats, and Ken lunges his left leg on a pass to pursue. This is a very ambidextrous weapons form. Chris loses his dagger, hit to his body. Of course, before learning sword and dagger, it's best to start with sword alone. It's easier to manage one weapon than two, of course. Barely parried. And attacked Chris's body. We're getting quite tired here, the swords are fairly heavy. Counterattack to Ken's body. And salute and shake hands. The broadsword is another historical weapon. Based off the work of George Silver from 1595, this is a cutting and thrusting sword, and one of the more complete pre-modern systems that we have. Here are Mike and Bill demonstrating broadsword. Bill is a real George Silver fanatic. Obviously, Bill has reach on Mike, but Mike has timing, distance, and footwork on his side. And there's a hit to Bill's arm. George Silver expressed some of the fundamentals of fencing, such as keeping distance and moving your hand before foot. Mike's using these principles to create a very nice parry or post trap. See how this goes. Unexpected accelerating, he hits Bill's arm. Bill's arm, of course, is the closest target to Mike. Mike's trap doesn't go as planned here, so he improvises with the counterattack to Bill's hand. Here's Bill and Anthony. This is interesting. Bill has his broadsword, while Anthony has a heavy saber. We actually do a lot of mixed weapons fencing, but showing all the combinations would make this a very long video. Anthony waits for his moment, and makes an offline beat attack to cut Bill's arm. This sequence shows the importance of distance and timing. Anthony controls the distance to get the hit there. Bill's hit had no force. The Dussack is another historical weapon that we practice. It's a short cutting weapon, seen here in Joachim Meyer's treatise from 1570. Here's Chris and Brandon playing at Dussack. Leather Dussacking like this were often used for training. This is a fun game to play, and it's very challenging because the weapons are so short. Here's sword and buckler. First shown in manuscript 133 from the early 14th century, this is the earliest known European fencing book. It shows a priest, a student, and a woman named Walpurgis fencing with this typical medieval weapon. Here are Chris and John demonstrating some plays. Note how the sword and buckler work together. The buckler works to defend the hand. They're really one weapon, not two. The buckler can also detach to check the opponent's sword. And here's some loose play of sword and buckler. This system uses both cut and thrust. Of course, all the elements of fencing are still there. Timing, distance, blade opposition, etc. The principles of fencing really haven't changed since the Middle Ages. And with knowledge not just of fencing, but of intellectual history, we can reconstruct the systems of the past. Good caution. Fencing masters of the past taught not just the sword for fencing or for the duel, but also how to deal with a sudden attack. Here are some self-defense sequences from Fiore de Liberi's treatise of 1410, and here are Chris and Ken demonstrating some of these techniques. Fiore says to break the arm, and then to take them to the ground. We're not doing that here because we don't want to hurt each other. Of course, knowledge of distance and timing help here as well. Here's the Renaissance two-handed sword, as shown in Francesco Alfieri's treatise of 1653. This could be as tall as the user. Here are Marissa and Ken showing the use of this mighty weapon. Of course, Marissa's sword is smaller than Ken's because she's also a smaller person. Because of the weight of the weapon, using the Bolognese is critical. A cut to Marissa's arm, and another cut to Marissa's head. She's really got to get in there because she's smaller, so she does and cuts to Ken's head. And here's another cut to Ken. With a weapon this heavy, a sword that's not in constant motion is a dead sword. So Marissa can bind and then thrust to Ken's body. Lastly, we also practiced armor combat and jousting. Here's Ken and Stan Roberts at the SCA's Penzig War in 2018. Hits to protected areas are invalid. This can make armored combat quite a test of endurance. This pass ends with a thrust to Ken's unprotected groin. The spears we're using are hardwood and have blunted steel heads. Throwing Stan out of bounds would also be a victory, but he sidesteps. Armored fighting probably requires the most fitness of any of the weapons forms. The pass ends with a thrust to Stan's armpit. Here's some practice jousting. This is just a practice pass because Ken's partner didn't have a safe enough helmet. We're at the Ohio Renaissance Fair Fairgrounds. I hope this was educational for you, and thank you for watching. Be sure to visit our website at mhsswords.com.